So to close today's the content portion, the presentation portion of the software supply chain security forum, really honored to have Garen Lacey here. Mr. Lacey is the Department of State's Deputy Assistant Secretary and the Assistant Director for Cyber and Technology Security. And as you know, I mean, the State Department has a vast mission and a vast network and array of systems to have to support. You know, we started this this program today with a conversation from the DoD perspective. State has scale in a different way, and unfortunately doesn't have quite the resources drawn that DoD does. So there's particular challenges here to have to support across 270 foreign missions. In any number of international joint relationships. So first of all, thank you for being here and for sharing your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, you know, in some reason, we're talking about trusted vendors and understand what's going on. You need to get connectivity back to the United States from highly contested environments. The State Department has to operate in environments where sometimes trusted vendors simply don't exist. How do you, I mean, maybe you can give some examples of those challenges and then talk a little bit about how you can creatively bring the supply chain security to that unique mission.
Sure. No, it's one of the more fun and really underrated aspects of what we do when we talk about projecting U.S. foreign policy all around the world. First off, the supply chain discussion is one that really highlights the macrocosm in differences on a geopolitical scale between us and our adversaries. We deal with one critical component that our adversaries do not, and it shows up most prominently in supply chain as a threat vector. What we deal with election cycles. We deal with changes in administration. Our primary adversaries do not change administrations. They don't think in terms of election cycles. They think in terms of decades of influence. And it shows up most predominantly in supply chain. The supply chain issues that we are seeing right now in terms of our foreign policy issues and in terms of our embassies and posts around the world, and even in terms of our critical infrastructure here in the United States, those issues, the seeds of those issues were laid 10 and 15 years ago. Playing the long game, looking beyond election cycles, looking beyond press cycles, and looking at global influence on a decade-by-decade scale. Now, at the department, we have the benefit of being diplomats 24/7, 365. And the good folks that work on these problem sets in the department do that outside of election cycles. So there are things that we have in place. I don't see any of my courier colleagues here, but shout out to the Bureau of Diplomatic Security, Diplomatic Courier Service. None faster than these. For 100 years, we've known about issues with supply chain. Our Diplomatic Courier Service move more secure materials around the world than any other organization in the world. So sometimes the answer is low tech and not high tech. Purchase your stuff securely from a vendor that you do trust and then ship it to the location where you need. That does create some complexities in operation, but last time I checked, we are the U.S. government. We do things pretty big. We can handle those complexities.
Yeah. Very good. And it's not only sort of access and whether there's the technical security and reliability on this. When your local suppliers are tied to a host nation's politics or power structure, there's, you know, there can be motive questions as well as just competence questions. How do you decide when you're going to ship it in yourself versus when there are partners that you can work with, if you have to avoid them entirely, or if you can, you know, trust but verify?
Sure. No, and I think it boils down to taking a look at your business need at specific posts and in specific locations. How low tech can you go and still be effective? Do I need to ship materials, or can I build out a piece of infrastructure at the local hardware store and know that I can go to that local hardware store and get those dumb components of materials that I can easily screen and only ship in the more complex pieces that I need to? I think when you look at supply chain on a whole, you have to look at business need. And sometimes it is okay to sacrifice functionality. If we look at how our adversaries operate in what they consider hostile environments, our adversaries do not operate high tech at all. They operate at an adequate level of technology, but they make the sacrifices and convenience for sustainability within that supply chain ecosystem.
Right.
Now, again, our adversaries, when we talk supply chain, this battlefield is slanted against us tremendously. Even when our adversaries operate in our environments, we follow rules. We follow laws. That's what we do as the United States. The adversaries do not. Furthermore, they change laws and they change rules. So you have to be flexible in terms of your business delivery. What is the minimum viable product in a specific post that you can deliver, and what is the minimum level of complexity that you want to add because of supply chain to deliver that product in that particular location?
And what about the resiliency question and making sure the reliability? How do you factor in as you're deciding whether to go to the local hardware store, ship things in, for when things inevitably break and go wrong? You can't leave a key diplomatic mission lacking that key technology while you wait for a shipment from DC.
Absolutely. And that's where we rely on the human factor being our personnel. We deploy experts, our friends in diplomatic technology, our friends in diplomatic security. We have experts on the ground who specialize in solving those problems. One of the other things that we do tremendously well, we are the State Department, we're diplomats by nature. We have foreign allies in these locations where we may not be able to get things in, but they can. We can consolidate and do some of that collective action where we can complement each other.
Right.
So when we talk about solutions, the high-tech solutions are fun to talk about, but we have to make sure we're taking care of the fundamental low-tech solutions. Are we leveraging our partners in region as best as we can? Are we allowing our partners to leverage us as best we can? Are we working with other embassies and other friendly consulates to borrow both expertise and materials when needed? I think those things are the things that make us the most flexible. When it comes to the reliance on the technology that we're pushing out, that cycle is never, ever, ever going to end. It's always going to accelerate. But when you take in mind the complementary aspects of who's in the foxhole next to you, right? What are your partners in other embassies in other countries doing? Your problem may already be a solution that they have, and vice versa. They may have already solved a problem for you. So I think we have to try not to be so American in certain places, like where we have to blaze down this path by ourselves, where we can rely on solutions that other folks have already come with. And then we have to be very American in other aspects and blaze a trail and innovate, particularly when it comes to emerging technology.
Okay. And I'm glad you mentioned the diplomatic relationships part of this. Does that factor, do diplomatic considerations play into your calculus on deciding which approach you're going to take? I mean, have there ever been cases where the right security decision created diplomatic friction, an allied nation where you still don't fully trust their technology? Or?
No, absolutely, absolutely. Our good friends that work the geopolitical events, our management counselors, our political officers, our economic officers, and in partnership with our Department of Commerce, these are the factors that we rely on them. That's their business case. And yes, there have absolutely been times where we know this is not the right tool, this is not the right technology, we know this does introduce a risk, but they have articulated that the business need to maintain a healthy geopolitical relationship with this partner is more important. It is more important. And when we lay out what the risk is and our business partners lay out what the business need is and that business need outweighs, it's up to us as security practitioners to, yes, hold our nose and say, all right, well then in that case, we will do our best to minimize its effect and minimize its impact. But those are absolutely political decisions that are made. And as security practitioners, when it comes to supply chain, we have to think through that lens of business and anticipate when that signal may come to us.
Right. Good. So the point of this next question is about lessons learned, not about dirty laundry on things.
Sure.
But has there ever been a case that you can sort of speak to at a broad level, at least, of where a vendor or partner sort of passed all the vetting but still introduced a security risk, and more importantly, like what can we learn from those gaps that creep in?
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's kind of a setup question. I'm going to answer that question with a story that I think everyone can relate to, and it's not going to be in the State Department. But
That's a very diplomatic answer.
of course. I think in the early 2010s, Target had a supply chain issue with one of their HVAC vendors, Fazio Mechanics, right? It's a classic example where Target was doing everything right. They were really at the forefront of cybersecurity. They had vetted their HVAC vendor, Fazio Mechanics, and they were doing everything right. But a particular user was human engineered to give up a credential to a system that was connected, and now you look at that kind of convergence of supply chain, human intelligence, and awareness. And at the time, we weren't thinking holistically about supply chain, cyber, and the human component. It's one of those classic examples where a robust awareness program for your users, making sure that the average user understands the need to protect their own credentials and their own information would have been tremendously helpful. Framing that through the lens of an HVAC vendor and why it's important when you're dealing with a partner as big and targeted as Target. Play on words. So I think one of the lessons learned is that the solutions always have to be holistic. That human component is part of the solution, and that human component includes every user that touches your network, and being able to reach them at a level where, meet them where they are, be able to message through a lens that they can appreciate so that you can alter that behavior and help them be partners. I always joke when in forums like this, when we're talking cyber, we're talking supply chain, we're talking risk management, right? Going out to an average user at an HVAC corporation and telling them, zero trust is really important to you and here's why. It's an awful way to make your users partners, right? You have to frame it through the lens that they are concerned with. And I think that's one of the key lessons learned when I look at a situation like that.
Very good. And, every organization deals with that human factor. And every organization has external crises that sort of, you don't have control over, you still have to respond to. I think it's safe to say the State Department is exposed to more of those external crises than most organizations. Is there a recent example of like where the department's had to pivot quickly to keep these mission critical systems running? And are there lessons that that folks that maybe have a less global footprint could still apply when Murphy's Law hits them?
Yeah, I mean, countless. Obviously, COVID is one of the biggest ones that you can possibly imagine. Taking a look at how you do service delivery, how you still continue to move materials, despite the fact of a global pandemic. Bathrooms in secure areas in embassies still need to keep working, right? Elevators that service secure areas in embassies in other countries still need to keep working. And you have to be creative about, well, do I have the technicians on the ground? If I can't get the materials there, can I get a person there, right? That classic example, I've got an elevator that's broken and 3 of them are down. Okay, 2 of them are working. Maybe I can get 2 elevators up and working if I've got the expertise. Sometimes supply chain is not about delivering materials. Sometimes it's about delivering expertise. COVID really showed us that and taught us to think outside the box in terms of using materials and skill sets that we had on site to solve problems. One that I lived through personally when I was the regional director for the Middle East and North Africa was the Qatari embargo in the late 2010s. All of a sudden, we couldn't move anything around the Middle East. All of the normal routes and chains were completely broken. So again, we had to learn to rely on partners. We had to learn to rely on the resources that were there. We had to learn to build that muscle memory and communication. Now, that's solving the problems that are facing you right now. What we have to do is take a look at business delivery and technology from that decade-long, long-term perspective. When we build the systems, we have to build them to be resilient with minimal maintenance and minimal contact. We have to build them to be resilient whether or not the transport infrastructure needs to change immediately. We have to build them to be resilient. I mean, take a look at what's happening with global change and global climate. We have to build them to be resilient for an environment to become more humid over the next 10 or 15 years than it's ever been. Horror stories of me working on 600-pound ballistic doors in environments that are extremely humid and rusting, thinking when this was installed, they didn't think that we needed to have rust-resistant materials here. Wow. So now me and 40 other people are trying to lift this 600-pound door off hinges. So we have to think that way when we're talking about deploying in the widest, most diverse range of environments that you can possibly imagine.
Excellent. Well, thankfully, the code that we're working with in this conversation is lighter than that. So it's, so we're just about up against time. So I want to kind of get to, if you had to pick like one wake-up call incident that has really, made you rethink supply chain security. What would that be, and how has your approach changed based on that?
The easy answer here is solar winds, right? That's the one everyone's going to say. Oddly enough, solar winds had a minimal impact on the State Department. The one that sticks out to me in my mind was NotPetya in 2017, and mainly because I wasn't a cyber practitioner at the time. I was a traditional counter-espionage technical security engineer, but I remember that the Russians used what was designed to look like ransomware, but was really malware, to go after the Ukrainians. And it spread. It spread all over the place. Hit Maersk and their financial and accounting applications. And I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, collateral damage from a nation-state cyber actor cost the global economy about $10 billion in a way that no one would have possibly imagined. I mean, I'm 100% certain at the time in 2017, Maersk was not thinking that they were going to be collateral damage to a Russian cyber attack. And just knowing how interdependent we are, the adversary that we're looking for is the one that we're most prepared for. State Department, we deal with the big three all the time: Russia, China, North Korea, Iran. But the secondary and tertiary effects of a cyber attack that's not aimed at you, that's the one that makes me apprehensive at night, because it can spread to all levels of critical infrastructure, to mom and pop small businesses that by nature and design should not have to be prepared for something like that, because they're not going to be a target, but in essence are always affected. And that's where that collective action really needs to come together, right? The public sector, the private sector, partnerships, the raising the bar across the lowest common denominator of technology users, so that they are armed with the basics to do the small things to keep themselves secure.
Wonderful. So we are going to leave it there. I ask you to sit with me for just a moment here, and ask all of you to stay with us for 5 more minutes here. Just a quick recap of what happens next. We're going to have some quick closing remarks. We're going to break for lunch. Lunch is upstairs in the exhibit hall. Would encourage you to go up, take advantage, continue these conversations as you see fit. And then for all those who are interested, would make sure you are back here at 1:30 sharp for the tabletop exercise. And I think it will really bring some valuable context to the conversations we've had this morning. Lineage and the Bug Crowd team have put together a great program for the afternoon, and if you didn't sign up, you're still welcome. So please join us for that. I want to give a thanks to Lineage for being our partner on this, to Reversing Labs and Bug Crowd for supporting the program, and to all of our speakers for taking part in this. And so you, sir, thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and we appreciate you taking the time and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you, Troy. Appreciate it. Appreciate it.